In the vast expanse of space, a floating school sat silently in orbit around a distant planet. This was no ordinary school. It was a prestigious academy designed to educate the brightest minds in the galaxy. And it wasn't just any school. This was a school where students learned in zero gravity, born and raised in an environment that most humans could never comprehend. Their bodies were adapted to life in space, effortlessly floating and moving in ways that left Earth-born humans struggling to keep up. Lena, a young girl with wild brown hair and bright, determined eyes, was one of the few human students at the academy. The others were not like her. They had been born in zero gravity, their bodies growing and evolving in ways that allowed them to move fluidly through the weightlessness of space. They were taller, stronger, and faster. They had powers that Lena could only dream of. She, on the other hand, had spent most of her life on Earth, where gravity had weighed down on her every step, every movement. At the academy, Lena was an outsider. It wasn't that the other students hated her. No, they simply didn't see her. To them, she was an anomaly, something out of place, something they couldn't fully understand. They would watch her stumble through the weightless halls, trying to move gracefully but failing every time. Her Earth-born instincts took over, and she couldn't seem to shake them, no matter how hard she tried. The teasing started early, and it didn't take long for Lena to become the subject of mockery. She would watch, frustrated, as her classmates would glide effortlessly through the halls, their movements smooth and elegant, while she struggled to stay upright, awkwardly tumbling in midair. She'd hear their whispers as they flew by, some laughing, others snickering. Earthborn, huh? You'll never keep up with us. She's always so clumsy. Maybe they should have trained her more before sending her up here. Lena's face flushed as she heard their whispers. She tried to ignore them, but the words stung. She could hear them as she walked through the floating corridors, always one step behind. At lunch, the cafeteria was full of students eating their meals, their trays floating beside them as they chatted amongst themselves. Lena, as usual, found herself seated at a table in the corner, away from the groups of laughing students. She pushed her food around on her tray, picking at it, but not really eating. The other students barely acknowledged her presence, too focused on each other. As she picked up her fork, her hand trembled slightly. She had tried so hard to fit in. She had taken lessons to adapt to zero gravity, to move with the fluid grace of her classmates, but nothing worked. It felt like her own body betrayed her, as though Earth's gravity had permanently marked her. Every move she made was awkward, every step a reminder of how different she was. And yet, there was a part of her that refused to give up. She couldn't explain it, but deep down, something told her that this struggle wasn't just about fitting in. It was about proving something, not just to her classmates, but to herself. She was here for a reason, and she wasn't going to let her weaknesses define her. That afternoon, Lena was summoned to the academy's training chamber. It was time for another physical test, a weekly challenge where students had to demonstrate their strength, agility, and ability to adapt to zero gravity. Lena had always dreaded these tests. The other students made them look effortless, their bodies gliding through the air as though they were born to fly. But Lena struggled. She was always behind, always a step too slow. As the class filed into the chamber, Lena took a deep breath and tried to steady herself. The instructor, a tall alien with 4 arms and a commanding presence, stood at the front of the room. He clicked his mandibles together, a sign of authority in his species, and began his speech. "Today's test will be a simulation of real-world conditions," he said. "You will be asked to navigate through a series of obstacles while moving in zero gravity. The objective is to demonstrate your agility, precision, and ability to think under pressure. Your performance will be judged based on both speed and accuracy." Lena's heart raced. She had trained for these tests, but it never seemed to be enough. She had studied the movements of her classmates, but they made everything seem so easy, and she felt like an outsider. She could already feel the weight of their judgment on her. One by one, The students were called to participate in the simulation. First, it was Zorak, a tall, silver-skinned alien from a planet where zero gravity was the norm. He zipped through the obstacle course with ease, twisting and turning through the air with fluid grace. The students cheered as he completed the course in record time. Next came Reina, a muscular girl from a different zero-G planet. She flew through the course like a comet, her movements sharp and precise. She finished without breaking a sweat, and the instructor nodded in approval. Lena watched them, her stomach turning. It was her turn next. She knew she couldn't match their grace or speed. As she floated toward the starting point, she could feel the eyes of her classmates on her. The whispers had already begun. She adjusted her grip on the wall, trying to steady her body. Her movements felt stiff and unnatural compared to theirs. The instructor signaled for her to begin. Lena pushed off the wall, her body jolting slightly as she moved forward. The first obstacle was an array of spinning rings suspended in the air. The other students had navigated through them with ease, weaving in and out of the rings without breaking their stride. But Lena? She misjudged the first ring, slamming her side into it with a soft thud. She winced, pushing herself away quickly to avoid being stuck. The other students snickered quietly, but Lena ignored them. She pushed forward, trying to regain her focus. As she maneuvered through the rest of the course, she stumbled again and again, miscalculating her jumps and struggling to stay on course. Her body was too heavy, too rigid compared to the others. It felt like she was swimming through molasses, every movement a battle against her own instincts. When she finally reached the end of the course, her face was flushed, her breath heavy. The instructor didn't say a word as she floated back to the rest of the students. She knew what they were thinking. She had failed. Again. But as she floated back to the sidelines, something shifted inside her. It wasn't anger. It wasn't frustration. It was something else, something stronger, a sense of determination. I won't give up, she thought. Not this time. The whispers continued, but this time, Lena didn't let them affect her. She refused to listen to the doubts, refused to let the mocking words define her. There had to be a way to overcome this. She had to prove to herself that she was capable, that she could do this, no matter how much harder it was for her than it was for the others. The rest of the day passed in a blur, but as Lena lay in her dorm room that night, staring out at the stars, a new resolve began to form. The academy was more than just a place to learn. It was a test of endurance, a test of strength. And Lena had to pass it, not for anyone else, but for herself. She was human, and maybe that was why she struggled. Maybe she didn't have the same abilities as the others, but that didn't mean she couldn't learn. That didn't mean she couldn't adapt. She had to find a way to turn her weaknesses into strengths. And she would. She would find a way to prove herself, not just to her classmates, but to the entire galaxy. The journey ahead would be hard, filled with obstacles she couldn't yet imagine. But Lena wasn't afraid anymore. She was ready. The real test was only just beginning. The days after the training test were long and filled with a mix of frustration and determination. Lena spent hours each day trying to catch up with her classmates, working harder than ever to master the movements that came so naturally to the others. She practiced alone, floating in the academy's gym, attempting to mimic the smooth, fluid motion of her zero-G-born peers. But every time she thought she had mastered a maneuver, it slipped from her grasp like water running through her fingers. Her classmates, despite their earlier teasing, seemed to have forgotten about her awkwardness. They went on with their lives, laughing and chatting, while Lena quietly continued to struggle. Still, there was a part of her that wouldn't let go of the dream. Every night, as she lay in her dorm room staring at the stars outside the academy's large windows, she vowed to herself that she would prove them all wrong. She was meant to be here, she knew it, and she wasn't going to let anything stand in her way. Then, one day, something unexpected happened. Lena was in the gym again, trying to perfect a series of complicated flips through a set of rotating rings, when the Academy's loudspeakers crackled to life. "Attention all students. Report to the command center immediately. A new challenge has been issued." Lena floated over to the nearest wall, pushing herself off gently to head toward the command center. A knot of curiosity and anxiety tightened in her chest. What could this challenge be? It had to be something big, something important. She could feel it in the air. Something was different about this one. The command center was filled with students when Lena arrived, all talking excitedly. The instructor, a tall alien with translucent skin and glowing eyes, stood in front of a large holographic display. His voice rang out, commanding attention. "Students," he said, his voice calm and steady. "The Galactic Council has issued a new challenge for you all. This will not be like the tests you've faced so far. You will be placed in a simulated combat environment, facing off against each other in a high-stakes zero-gravity arena. The goal is simple: survival. Your abilities will be tested like never before. Only the strongest will succeed." Lena's heart raced as she listened to the instructor's words. A combat simulation. She hadn't expected anything like this. The thought of fighting in space, surrounded by other students who had been trained for this their entire lives, made her stomach flip with dread. She wasn't a fighter. She was the girl who stumbled through obstacle courses. The girl who was always too slow, too clumsy. How could she survive in a challenge like this? The instructor continued, "The students will be divided into teams. You will have to use both your intelligence and your physical skills to complete this challenge. The team that completes the objective and survives the longest will be deemed the winners. The losing teams will face consequences." Lena's mind raced. Consequences. What could that mean? She had never heard of anything like this. The stakes were higher than she had anticipated. It wasn't just about surviving the challenge. It was about succeeding in a dangerous and unfamiliar environment. She would have to rely on more than just her instincts. It would require everything she had, every ounce of mental and physical strength. After a few moments, the instructor motioned for everyone to gather. "Now we will divide you into teams. You'll face each other in a combat simulation, with zero gravity as your battlefield. You will have access to basic equipment, energy shields, stun guns, and a variety of tools to complete the mission objectives. But remember, this is a test of your abilities. Your teamwork, your skill, and your quick thinking will be the keys to survival." Lena's mind swirled as she thought about the challenge ahead. The students around her were all chatting excitedly, strategizing, and comparing their strengths and weaknesses. But Lena felt a heavy weight in her chest. She didn't belong in this world of competitive warriors. How could she face her classmates in combat when she could barely keep up in the training sessions? As the teams were announced, Lena found herself paired with Zorak, Reyna, and Jaren, the three most skilled students in the academy. Zorak, tall and fast, with silvery skin and an almost otherworldly grace. Reyna, strong and confident, her muscles perfectly suited for the zero-gravity environment. And Jaren, the academy's top strategist, known for his tactical genius. Lena was the odd one out, the weak link, and she knew it. Zorak gave her a nod as they were assigned to their team. "We'll need to rely on each other," he said, his voice calm and collected. "Stick with us, and you'll do fine." Lena forced a smile, but inside, her heart was pounding. Could she really keep up with them? She had no experience in combat. Her classmates were trained warriors, born for this environment, while she was still trying to learn how to float without colliding into the walls. The challenge began in an instant. The Academy's gymnasium morphed into a simulated battleground, with zero-gravity fields activated and holographic obstacles appearing in midair. Lena floated at the back of the team, trying to keep up, but already feeling out of place. The others zipped ahead, their movements seamless, while Lena struggled to adjust to the weightlessness. She pushed off the floor with a clumsy motion, quickly losing control as she drifted into a cluster of obstacles. "Lena!" Reyna's voice rang out as she floated past. Focus. Stay with us. Lena bit her lip and pushed herself forward. She had to focus. This was her chance to prove that she wasn't just the clumsy Earthborn girl. She needed to show them all that she had something they didn't. Something they couldn't see. As the team moved deeper into the arena, they encountered their first set of enemies, another group of students from a rival team. They had set up energy shields and were prepared for a fight. Lena's team immediately went into formation, their bodies floating gracefully as they moved in tandem, ready for combat. Zorak, with his enhanced speed, made the first move, darting forward and taking out an opponent with a quick stun shot. Reyna and Jaren flanked the enemies, working together to disarm them with precision. Lena hung back, trying to keep her composure, but her hands were sweating. She was out of her depth. Just then, one of the opponents turned and aimed a stun gun right at her. Lena's heart stopped. She wasn't fast enough to dodge it. But before she could react, she saw a flash of motion. Zorak had pushed her out of the way, taking the stun shot himself. He floated in mid-air, momentarily dazed but unharmed. "Stay alert," Zorak called out, shaking his head as he recovered. Lena's heart pounded in her chest. He had saved her. She had been so close to failing again. But Zorak had stepped in to protect her. She couldn't let him down. As the battle continued, Lena's mind began to clear. She wasn't just following the others anymore. She was thinking on her own. She noticed a pattern in the enemy's movements, their weaknesses. She saw where they were vulnerable, and when an opening presented itself, she took it. Lena didn't rely on brute force like the others. Instead, she used strategy and the one thing she had that the others didn't, her human adaptability. In a moment of unexpected brilliance, Lena used a nearby obstacle to her advantage, outsmarting one of the opponents by using the momentum of the zero-gravity environment. She outmaneuvered him, taking him down without firing a shot, something none of her classmates expected. As the last of the enemy students were defeated, Lena's team emerged victorious. They had completed the challenge, and for the first time, Lena felt a sense of accomplishment. She had proven to herself that she could survive, that she could contribute in ways she hadn't thought possible. The challenge had been intense, but as Lena floated back to the starting point, a new sense of confidence was beginning to grow within her. She wasn't just an outsider anymore. She had something to offer, something that her classmates had underestimated. And maybe, just maybe, this was the beginning of something greater. Zorak, Reyna, and Jaren floated back to her, their expressions a mix of admiration and surprise. "You did well," Zorak said, his voice genuine. "I didn't expect you to pull off that move. You've got potential." Lena smiled, a genuine smile, her heart light for the first time in ages. She wasn't just the clumsy human girl anymore. She was a part of something bigger, something that could change everything. The challenge was far from over, but Lena had taken the first step toward becoming the hero she had always dreamed of being. And nothing, not even zero gravity, could stop her now. The war drums were already beating. For weeks, Lena had been on edge, knowing that something big was about to happen. The simulated battle at the academy had been a wake-up call, not only for her but for everyone else. Her unexpected success had given her the confidence she needed, but nothing had prepared her for the reality of war. The war between the galaxy's most powerful factions had reached a tipping point, and the academy's students like Lena, were being called to action. She had trained her entire life for a moment like this, or so she thought. But now, as she stood at the edge of a galactic conflict, she couldn't help but feel the weight of everything. The energy that had been released from Earth's core, the mysterious power that had propelled her to this point, had become the key to the entire conflict. The planet Earth, once insignificant, had now become the prize that every civilization wanted to control. And Lena, the once bullied Earthborn girl, had unwittingly become humanity's greatest hope. It was early morning when the announcement came. Lena had barely slept, her mind racing with the implications of the war. The hum of the Academy's intercom system cut through her thoughts, signaling an urgent communication. "Attention all students," the voice of the Academy's head instructor crackled over the speakers. "The galactic war has reached its final stage. We are mobilizing all combat-ready students for a deployment to the front lines. Prepare yourselves. Your time to prove your worth has arrived." Lena's stomach dropped. She had heard rumors, whispers in the hallways, but hearing it from the instructor made it real. This wasn't a drill. This wasn't just training anymore. The war was coming to them, and they were being sent to fight in it. Lena stood up from her bed and walked over to the window. Outside, the stars twinkled peacefully, oblivious to the chaos that was about to unfold. The moon hung in the distance, casting a soft light across the Academy's docking bays. This was the calm before the storm, she realized. A cold shiver ran down her spine. In the Academy's courtyard, she saw her classmates gathering. They were all so ready. Zorak, Reyna, and Jiren were already lined up, preparing their gear and weapons. They looked like the warriors they had been born to be, their faces set with determination. Lena, on the other hand, felt like an imposter. The girl who had struggled to keep up in the Academy's training exercises, the one who had been bullied and laughed at, was now supposed to stand alongside them in battle. "Lena, you ready?" Zorak called to her from across the courtyard, his silvery skin shimmering in the morning light. Lena smiled weakly, adjusting the weight of the stun gun they had been issued. She still wasn't used to the weightlessness of the spacesuit, but she had learned to adapt. "I'm as ready as I'll ever be," she replied, her voice steadier than she felt. Reyna, the fierce, strong warrior of their group, grinned at her. "You've proven yourself already, Lena. We're with you." Jiren, who had always been calm and calculating, gave her a small nod of approval. "The others will underestimate you, but you've shown them what you're capable of. Just stay focused." Lena's heart pounded in her chest as she looked at her teammates. She hadn't felt truly part of their group until that moment. They were more than just classmates now. They were her team, and they were about to face the unknown together. The journey to the front lines took place in silence. Their ship, a sleek, battle-ready vessel that had been customized for the Academy's elite students, cut through the stars with efficiency. Lena sat in her seat, her hands resting on the cold, metallic surface in front of her. Outside the window, the galaxy stretched endlessly, and for the first time, she truly realized how small Earth was in the grand scheme of things. It was just a tiny speck, but it had become the focal point of the entire galaxy. "Lena," Reyna's voice broke through her thoughts. "Do you ever wonder how we got here?" Lena looked over at her, her brow furrowing. "What do you mean?" Reyna's eyes softened. "How a human like you, someone born on Earth, ended up fighting in a war that's bigger than anything we could have imagined. It's not just about the war, Lena. It's about the power Earth holds. About you." Lena blinked. She hadn't thought of it that way. All she had ever known was her struggle to fit in, to prove herself. But now, she was part of something larger than herself. She was fighting for Earth, for humanity. "I'm not the only one," Lena replied quietly. "I just want to prove that I belong." Reyna nodded, her expression understanding. "You already have, Lena. You don't need to prove anything to anyone." Hours later, they arrived at the battle zone. The enemy fleet was waiting, its massive ships looming ominously in the distance. Lena stood with her team on the observation deck, watching the space battle unfold before them. The skies were filled with lasers and explosions, ships disintegrating as they collided in the great void of space. Zorak turned to Lena, his face set in a look of determination. "This is it. We stick together. Follow our lead, and we'll make it through this." Lena nodded, swallowing the lump in her throat. The sight of the war, the chaos, was overwhelming. But she knew she couldn't back down now. She was no longer the girl who had been bullied. She wasn't the weak human. She was a soldier now, fighting for her planet, her people, and she would prove herself. The battle was nothing like the simulations. It was raw, chaotic, and terrifying. They were deployed into the heart of the conflict, surrounded by enemies from every corner of the galaxy. Lena's heart raced as she moved through the zero-gravity field, her teammates at her side. Their mission was simple: infiltrate the enemy flagship, disable their weapon systems, and give humanity a fighting chance. The ship they boarded was massive, a dark, looming fortress of alien technology. It was like nothing Lena had ever seen. Twisting, metal structures that seemed to warp and shift around them. The air was thick with tension, the low hum of the ship vibrating beneath their feet. Zorak led the way, his movements swift and precise. Reyna and Jiren were right behind him, while Lena kept close to the rear, trying to steady her breathing. The mission was supposed to be a sneak attack, swift and strategic, but everything about it felt dangerous. Suddenly, the quiet was broken by the screech of an alarm. A group of enemy soldiers appeared ahead of them, weapons raised. The first round of fire came from Reyna, her stun gun discharging with a sharp crack. It struck one of the soldiers, sending him tumbling back. But more followed, and the tension in the air grew. Lena watched as her teammates fought with ease, but she knew she had to act. She couldn't just hide behind them anymore. She had already proven that she could think quickly. Now was the time to act. In that moment, Lena saw a gap in the enemy's formation, a weak spot in their defense. Her mind raced as she formulated a plan. She called to her teammates. "Follow me," she shouted, pushing herself into the zero-gravity space. Reyna and Zorak hesitated, but Lena was already moving. She used the momentum of the zero-gravity environment, spinning and twisting, to slip behind the enemies, disorienting them. The soldiers fired wildly as Lena maneuvered past them, using her small size and speed to her advantage. She disabled the weapons systems with a series of well-aimed shots, taking out their power supply with surprising accuracy. It was risky, but it worked. As the enemy's weapons failed, their forces faltered. Lena's team followed her lead, securing the area and continuing their assault on the flagship. The battle wasn't over, but Lena's actions had turned the tide. By the time they reached the control room, the flagship had been severely weakened. The final moments of the mission were a blur, more fire, more chaos, but Lena's mind was clear. She had done it. She had proven her worth not just to her teammates but to herself. When they returned to the safety of their ship, the team's faces were filled with a mix of exhaustion and disbelief. They had done it. They had won. Zorak turned to Lena with a look of respect. "You did it, Lena. You led us through that." Lena smiled, her heart swelling with pride. We did it together. And in that moment, she knew. She wasn't just a human girl anymore. She was a hero. The aftermath of the battle was a blur of flashing lights, low hums of machinery, and an overwhelming sense of disbelief. As the team floated back to the safety of their ship, Lena couldn't shake the adrenaline rush that still coursed through her veins. The battle had been grueling, and they had barely made it out alive. Yet, they had succeeded. The flagship of the enemy fleet had been neutralized, and the warfront had shifted in favor of humanity. But as Lena floated in the quiet of the ship's corridor, her thoughts raced. She had done it. She had proven herself. She had shown her classmates and herself that she wasn't just the clumsy Earthborn girl anymore. She was capable. She was a hero. The echo of her heartbeat was the only sound as she made her way to the debriefing room. Her mind flashed to the chaos of the battle, to the moment when she had taken control of the mission, when she had defied the odds and led her team to victory. She had always felt weak, always struggled to keep up with her classmates. But now she knew she was stronger than she had ever believed. The door to the debriefing room slid open, and Lena stepped inside. Her team, Zorak, Reyna, and Jiren, were already seated, their faces somber but proud. The instructor, a tall alien with 4 arms and sharp eyes, stood at the front, waiting for the students to settle. "Sit down, students. The instructor said, his voice calm but filled with authority. "You've completed the mission, and you've done so with remarkable results." Lena sat down, her heart still racing. She could barely believe it. The weight of the moment hit her all at once. This was it. This was her triumph. The instructor nodded to each of them in turn. "Zorak, Reyna, Jaren, and Lena. You performed admirably, even against overwhelming odds. I must say, Lena, I did not expect such a strategic maneuver from you. You have proven yourself, not just to your teammates, but to me as well. Your leadership in the field was exceptional." Lena's chest swelled with pride as her teammates turned to look at her. Zorak gave her a small, respectful nod. Reyna smiled at her, and Jaren raised an eyebrow, clearly impressed. The instructor's praise wasn't just for her skills. It was for her courage, her ability to think outside the box in the face of danger. "Lena," the instructor continued, "you've set an example for the others. Your adaptability and quick thinking saved your team and changed the course of this mission. You may not have been born to zero gravity, but today you've shown that you belong here as much as anyone else." The instructor's words felt like a weight lifting off her shoulders. The years of bullying, the feelings of inadequacy, it all seemed so distant now. She had found her place, and no one could take that away from her. But there was more to this victory than the praise. There was more at stake now. Earth was no longer a small, insignificant planet in the galaxy. It had become the focal point of the war, and Lena, the once overlooked human girl, had become the symbol of humanity's strength. The days following the battle were filled with briefings, celebrations, and preparations for the next phase of the war. Lena's victory became a rallying cry for humanity. The other students of the academy, who had once seen her as weak and unworthy, now came to her for advice. Her teammates began to look up to her, not just as a fighter, but as a leader. In the academy's common area, Lena found herself surrounded by students eager to hear her stories, asking her how she had pulled off her unexpected strategy. She told them of her thoughts during the battle, how she had seen the pattern in the enemy's movements and taken advantage of the one thing they didn't expect: her quick thinking and human adaptability. "It wasn't about brute strength," Lena explained. "It was about using what I had that they didn't. Earth-born instincts, if you will. The ability to think fast and make decisions when everything's falling apart." Her words resonated with the others. They had always relied on their physical abilities, but Lena's success had shown them that there was more to being a hero than strength alone. That night, the Academy held a celebration in honor of the victory. It wasn't just a victory for Lena's team. It was a victory for Earth. Humanity had proven that it wasn't just a bystander in the galaxy's conflicts. It had a voice, and it would no longer be ignored. Lena stood on the stage with her team, their faces glowing with pride as the crowd cheered. The lights flickered and the holographic banners waved in the air, displaying Earth's flag. The atmosphere was electric, charged with the excitement of the moment. They had won a battle, but it was more than just a tactical victory. It was a statement to the galaxy. Earth was no longer a footnote. It was a force to be reckoned with. As the applause died down, Lena stepped forward, her voice quiet but steady as she addressed the crowd. "This victory isn't just mine," she said, her eyes scanning the faces in the crowd. "It's humanity's. It's all of us working together. No matter where we come from, no matter what we've been through, we can make a difference. Earth isn't just a small, insignificant planet anymore. It's our home, and we will protect it. Together." The crowd erupted into applause again, louder this time. Lena felt a surge of warmth and pride. She wasn't just an outsider anymore. She was part of something much bigger, a community, a planet, a species that had found its place in the galaxy. Weeks passed, and the war continued to rage across the galaxy. The front lines shifted, and more battles were fought, but Lena remained at the heart of the human resistance. Her reputation as a strategist and a leader only grew. The other factions began to take notice of the humans' resilience, and some of the galactic races who had once looked down on Earth began to rethink their position. Lena's success had proven one thing: humans had a spark that couldn't be extinguished. But despite her growing fame, Lena never let the accolades go to her head. She knew that the war was far from over, and that there would be more challenges ahead. What mattered now was not just the victory, but how they would use their newfound strength. Lena was determined to see the war through to the end, to ensure that humanity's place in the galaxy was secured, not just through strength, but through unity, intelligence, and courage. One day, as the war seemed to slow down, Lena found herself in the Academy's training room once more. The familiar weightlessness of zero gravity felt more comfortable now. She had come to terms with it, learning to move with grace and agility. As she practiced, her thoughts turned inward. She wasn't the same person who had arrived at the Academy, unsure of herself and unsure of her place. She had grown, not just in skill, but in confidence. She had learned that heroism wasn't about being the strongest or the fastest. It was about standing up when it mattered most, using what you had to make a difference. It was about believing in yourself, even when the world tried to convince you otherwise. As Lena performed a flawless somersault through the training rings, she caught sight of her reflection in the glass. Her once awkward movements were now fluid and confident. She wasn't just a girl who had been bullied and underestimated. She was a war hero, a leader of humanity's future. And she would continue to fight, not just for victory, but for the hope of a brighter tomorrow for her people, her planet, and the entire galaxy.